No Forbidden Alchemies there. So definitely some targets for those cremates.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that Ben actually thought that Esper was going to be big enough in this tournament that he was contemplating playing a main deck Psychic Spiral, but it looks like he's actually just moved it to the sideboard.
Okay. We do see that Ben is on 6 cards right now. Steven is trying to... He's on a mulligan to 5. We're going to see if he's going to keep those 5 or if he's going to take a mulligan. But we are going to be underway here shortly. Again, Star City Games Open Series is here live in Milwaukee. If you guys do want to interact with us as we do begin the day, second of 10 very long rounds at SCG Live, hashtag SCGMKE. Interact with us over the course of the weekend as we're going to be talking about spoilers. We have a huge announcement after this round. And, we're going to talk about a lot of standard Magic, too.
Yes.
Okay. So it is going to be a blast as Ben starts off with a Goblet Shrine and an Athalia Drown Yard, but no blue sources.
Yep. And the opening on the Nathalia Drown Yard is often the last land played, so this is a pretty clear giveaway that Ben does not have a third land in hand.
We're going to see Steve play a Blind Obedience and pass the turn back. Ben going to draw a card. Looks like he draws a Think Twice, and he just does kick it back. So as you said, pretty telling when you do play the Drown Yard early that there is not another land in your hand. You're going to be playing off the top to try to hit those land drops. If he does draw a blue land, of course, he can start thinking once and thinking twice and undo his mulligans and his mana issues.
So it looks like Steve is going for a Lingering Souls here.
Yeah. 2 Spirit Tokens are going to be coming in. We'll see if Ben can draw. He draws a Dissipate, so again without a land here. Not underneath a significant amount of pressure, but he does want to get that land drop, maybe get into a Supreme Verdict here and really get the ball rolling before he does get run over. But Steve's deck doesn't really put on a huge clock either.
Yeah, the most concerning thing for Ben, I believe, is that Blind Obedience, because it means that even if he does stabilize the game, that any random spell Steve plays is all going to add up.
Yeah.
So, traditionally, Esper's in this position where if you're playing Supreme Verdicts and Detention Spherings, you can kind of just clear the whole game up. But the incremental damage of Blind Obedience might mean that Ben can stabilize the game and still get kind of burned out.
And you are going to see 1 Extort trigger from the Blind Obedience. His Lingering Souls is going to get flashed back. He's going to pay the 1 for the Extort trigger. 2 more Spirits are going to come into play. And Ben's life total is starting to become under duress a little bit here as he does draw another non-land card. It looks like he's going to have to discard something here. You see a Syncopate being pulled towards the forefront of his hand. Augur of Bola, Supreme Verdicts, a lot of things in his hand here. He's just going to discard Think Twice and pass the turn back with the idea if I do draw a blue land, I can't flash it back.
Mm-hmm.
Steve draws another Lingering Souls.
Pretty excellent draw here with 4 mana in play. You can cast his Lingering Souls, extort again.
All right, so here come those 4 spirits. Lundquist is going to move down to 13, likely 12 again, as you said, Pat, from that Extort trigger, and 2 more spirits going to put on the battlefield. So pretty unfortunate mulligan here for Ben. I mean, mulligan's down to 6 and keeps it, just not able to draw a blue source. Steve had to take a mulligan down to 5, of course, and it looks like oddly enough, he's just doing better than Ben is right now.
I watched a lot of Ben play at the Invitational because I was quickly out of the tournament and Ben was making a deep run. And most of the losses I saw him take were just simply not having blue mana.
Sure.
Sometimes I question whether or not these decks are supposed to have 4 copies of Nathalia Drown Yard in it, for example, because most of your losses in mulligans simply come to just not having blue mana early enough in the game. You see another Lingering Souls get cast here with an Extort trigger. So we're up to 6 spirits in play.
The turn back, Azorius Charm is the draw here, so not only is he not drawing any blue land, he's just not drawing any land, period, and he isn't going to concede the game. So Martincic is going to be up a game here on a very bit of a cripple fight there.
But yeah, that was not the most explosive draw from either player. Obviously, both players had mulligan, so that was part of it too. Yeah. And neither deck is especially explosive.
Yeah.
But Steve, with his Lingering Souls and his Blind Obedience, they're pretty able to wrap up that game against an opponent offering no resistance.
Well, we'll take a look at Ben's sideboard here, outside of drawing land, see if he can put up any more resistance, as he only did see Blind Obedience and Lingering Souls from Steve. Anything spicy over there, or something that's certainly going to be obvious to help him?
Well, part of the problem is Steve's deck is a little bit on the weird side, and Ben did not see a ton of cards, so it's hard to make too many conclusions about what's going on. That said, I think that he can be pretty comfortable in bringing in a Curse of Death's Hold, so you've seen Lingering Souls. Couple copies of Negate, pretty safe against what, broadly speaking, appears to be a control deck.
Sure.
Probably has a variety of spells. A single Duress seems safe to me, and that, I believe, looks like about it. I mean, Ben's got a lot of flexible sideboard cards here. Does he want a singleton Purify the Grave? Probably not, but again, he's seen some amount of graveyard interaction. Does he want a singleton Appetite for Brains? You can assume that there are some expensive cards in Steve's deck, you know, but it's hard to draw too many conclusions based on what you've seen. The Blood Crypt that Steve plays is especially, you know, if I'm in Ben's position, I'm especially like, he's playing some weird brew.
Sure.
You know, there's not any sort of really conventional deck playing Lingering Souls, Blind Obedience, and red spells. So you can only extrapolate so much from what you've seen in the game.
It's kind of easy to try to put him on maybe the Aristocrats Act 2. Maybe he has just like one Miser's Blind Obedience in his deck. You know, you could try to put them on something of that nature.
Right, yeah, it's actually, you're correct. It's actually totally reasonable to assume that Steve is playing some sort of Falkenrath Aristocrat deck, and that's not even close to being the case.
Yeah.
That's not what he's up to at all.
Yeah.
So if Ben brings in, you know, his 3 copies of Tragic Slip, anticipating that Falkenrath Aristocrat is there, those could end up being very poor draws.
Yeah, as we used to take a look at the Angels, Serenities, the Olivia Voldarens, and the Obzidats, all 2 ofs, not very good Tragic Slip targets. As we do take a look at Steve's sideboard here of 2 Gloom Surgeon, 2 Liliana the Veil, 4 Human Frailty, 2 Merciless Eviction, 4 Devour Flesh, and 1 Orzhov Charm. Not sure if he knows he's playing against Esper. I think there's a bit of a giveaway now that you saw the Drown Yard and the discard of Think Twice. He probably does. Probably has a pretty good idea what he's up against. And if he does know Ben at all or just follow the Open Series, he knows this is what Ben top-aided with last weekend. So of the cards that he can bring in, the only ones that are really appealing, at least in my opinion, are those 2 copies of Liliana the Veil. Devour Flesh, Gloom Surge, and Human Frailty, Merciless Eviction, much more, of course, for creature matchups. And the Orzhov Charm, while it does provide flexibility, doesn't really stand out as an all-star against an Esper strategy.
Yeah, I mean, Steve appears to be using most of his sideboard equity fighting aggressive decks and Human Naya especially. I don't know if that matchup is especially bad for him or if he's anticipating a lot of it, but he's certainly using a lot of his sideboard slots trying to shore up those kind of matchups. Doesn't have really that much to bring in against Esper, although Liliana the Veil has the potential to be a haymaker.
Yes. Only 2 of those in his sideboard, of course, but yeah, I think of any card that he's going to want to bring in, it's going to be those. Not sure what he's going to want to sideboard out. You know, he does have these 4 Mutilates in his deck. Those aren't going to be all that great. Maybe you see him sideboard down to 2 of those. Maybe you see him sideboard in the Gloom Surgeons for the other 2. You know, he's got some options here. Not a ton of them, but he does have to find some sort of room for those Lilianas, and Mutilate seems like they'd probably be the first card to go.
Yeah, the sweeper against the basically no creature deck, not where you would want to be lined up.
So we'll see if the next game or games can be what is probably a more accurate reflection of this matchup, which is a grinded out affair. Games that are not going to end very early at all. Yes, Steve does have Lingering Souls in his deck to kind of put some pressure on Ben, along with some creatures here in Obzidat and Olivia Voldaren. But I expect, you know, this match and these next couple of games to, you know, go 10+ turns each.
Yeah, in general, in these kind of matchups, I really would like to be on the Esper side of things, because a deck that's fairly slow, that's trying to grind you out with contextual card advantage, you know, cards like Lingering Souls and Angel Serenity and Obzidat, I would much rather have Sphinx's Revelation in my deck and just try to win the game that way than try to have my threats and answers line up correctly, you know, 1-for-1 while gaining value. That's sort of the deck that Steve has, and I think these decks are just fundamentally not favored against a deck like Esper.
Yeah, Steve's deck's kind of weird because, you know, there's like a lot of things going on here. It feels like it kind of wants to be an Esper deck, but it doesn't have Nephalia Drown Yard. He does have like these 3 copies of Sphinx Revelation in his deck, but they don't play nearly as well as they do in Ben's deck.
Right, it's not the same thing. You know, Ben's much more streamlined, card draw, counter spells, now Revelations to bury you.
Yeah.
Whereas in Steve's deck, Revelations is just kind of another power card, but it's a lot less efficient when you're drawing a bunch of Obzidats and Prophetic Prisms and Mutilate. It's just not the same level of efficiency that it has in Ben's deck.
Nor is it the same level of backbreaker
as
it would be from Ben's deck, which, you know, that might be how these games end up playing out. Alternatively, one thing that, you know, Ben can do, and he doesn't know about this with Steve's deck, is Ben can actually win the fight against Sphinx's Revelation, where Steve's deck cannot, because Steve doesn't have a card like Dispel to be able to, you know, have a battle over Sphinx's Revelation. So almost certainly Ben's Revelations are going to be better than Steve's in these next couple of games, provided we do get to go see a third game.
Yep. If Steve was backing this up with a bunch of duresses, then we would be having a different conversation.
Yes.
But
and now we do see Ben with a Hallowed Fountain, so he will get to play blue spells this game. Lucky, as Steve does draw a Sign in Blood for his turn. He's going to lead off with a Godless Shrine and pass the turn back.
$10 draft number 1. Your event is ready up here at the stage. This is a last call for a carry.
So you see a Drowned Catacomb in Ben's hand, among other things. Look like we see an Azorius Charm over there. As you said, Patrick, there is a decent chance that he does sideboard into an anti-aggro package. This is going to play the Drowned Catacombs. We'll see if he has a turn 2 play. He's just going to pass the turn back again because Steve's deck looked like an Aristocrats type deck on a mulligan of 5.
Ben has Duress in his hand, but I think he's trying to sandbag it for, a later spot. He doesn't want to fire it off just now. Probably wants to cycle.
You are going to see a Sign in Blood here from Steve. Ben is going to negate that. Says, no, thank you. You do not get to get any card advantage against me. Ben is going to draw a card. He is going to Duress here. We're going to see a Swamp. 2 copies of Watery Grave, a Prophetic Prism, a Drowned Catacomb, and a Lingering Souls. So that's actually 2 Catacombs, 1 Watery Grave to go with that Swamp, Prism, and Lingering Souls.
Unless Ben is really tied up on mana, I'm a little surprised to see him counter that Sign in Blood. Just because Steve has to discard. It's just draw 2, discard 1 because he's on the draw.
Sure.
But it could just be an issue of mana efficiency. He was willing to use it on kind of whatever.
So the choice here, I felt like he was going to take the Prism. Taking Lingering Souls is kind of backwards / counterintuitive, as he's going to take the opportunity here to cast an Augur of Bolas. Sphinx's Revelation is going to go to Ben's hand. Devour Flesh, another card going to go down to the bottom. Ben basically saying, currently I just have to beat a Lingering Souls, and with the configuration of his hand, he seems more than comfortably able to do that.
Yeah, do you feel like you'd rather have 2 1/1 flyers or have him draw a random card?
Yeah.
It's pretty much what the conversation is. Ben feels like he would rather play against the 2 1/1 flyers.
So we are going to see the first half of the Lingering Souls here from Steve. 2 Spirit Tokens going to come into play as Ben is going to untap. He's going to draw a Godless Shrine. See a Watery Grave in his hand as well right now, and an Azorius Charm. So just trying to do what Esper does, which is to get into that late game. You're going to see another Augur of Bolas here. Think Twice is the card he's going to take. Restoration Angel and a land are going to go to the bottom. First Augur of Bolas not only did it find a card, but now it's a tough guy.
Yeah, now, and this is sort of what we were talking about during the sideboarding. Just you're seeing the efficiency with which Ben's deck generates extra cards. This all has the potential to just chain into a devastating Revelation. It's much harder for Steve's deck to cobble together the same sequence because he's, instead of drawing card drawing spells that finds more lands and more card drawing spells, he drew an Olivia last turn, he drew a Blind Obedience this turn. These are just sort of disconnected pieces.
And you know that the Olivia in his hand, he does not have a red source to be able to cast that, so right now he can only play that Blind Obedience and, of course, flashback that Lingering Souls, and that's what he's going to start his turn with. Get 2 more Spirit Tokens out there. You saw Lundquist play that Godless Shrine untap, likely just to be able to cycle that Azorius Charm, and again, just build that velocity and get through his deck faster to that backbreaking Revelation.
I just need 1 more player to launch a booster draft. Please come up right now if you're interested in drafting.
And an unexpected upside there of Ben taking the Prophetic Prism is now there's an Olivia stranded uncastable in the hand.
You take a look at Steve's mana base here, looking for red sources. There are 4 copies of Blood Crypt. Outside of that, he does not have any other red, so he's drawing the 4 cards here in addition to those 3 other Prophetic Prisms. So Olivia Voldaren could be stranded there for a rather long time.
Yeah, the way that Steve's constructed his deck, he has to play a ton of Swamps to enable Mutilate, and that leaves him in a position where he can't play Dragon Skull Summit and similar cards if he wants his Mutilate to be as powerful as possible.
So we're going to see Ben cast a Think Twice here. See a Hollow Fountain in his hand, still has that Azorius Charm as well. Just getting through his deck, making sure he can hit those land drops, making sure that he can find a Supreme Verdict or something else. He's going to play a Water Grave and get in with those 2 Augur of Bolas, put Steve down to 17, just so that he can get himself stabilized. Going to use, his life total as a resource here.
Yeah, although he has to be a little more conservative with his life total than you would normally be in control mirror matches because Blind Obedience is in play.
Sure.
It is not a free-for-all. Often in Esper mirrors, you see people playing dual lands on tap all the time, just to have more mana to fight with syncopates and that sort of stuff. Ben needs to be a little more careful than that because of Blind Obedience.
So we are going to see a Cremate here with the Extort trigger. He's going to target, looks like probably one of those Think Twices.
That's what I would assume.
A little surprised that Ben didn't play that Water Grave untapped with the ability to flash back a Think Twice. Maybe he's just completely comfortable cycling an Azorius Charm here and just moving on.
And it's sort of the point what the point was that I just spoke to is with Blind Obedience in play, it's actually a cost for Ben to be playing his dual lands on tap. So I think in a lot of circumstances he would be happy to. Do we Azorius Charm on the token?
Yeah, so he puts Azorius Charms choosing to put an attacker on the top of his deck, so he wants to make it so there's one less Lingering Souls token out there. And as you said, he maybe is a little bit concerned about his life.
Yep. Just wants to give himself as much breathing room as possible.
So
Try to get in a position where we're revelating for 4 maybe, and then we can sort of enter the next phase of the game.
You see those 2 Augur Bolas come across. Ben going to play a Hollow Fountain. He's going to pass the turn back. Steve is going to untap. He's going to take a draw step momentarily here, and we'll see what he's able to find for his draw, which is a Drowned Catacomb. So still without a red source here for those Olivia of Alderan.
Could really use a Prism here. He would get an Extort trigger, then be able to get the Olivia in play.
I don't know. New card wouldn't hurt.
Yeah. As it stands, we're just leaning on these Lingering Souls tokens to try to take us home.
Yep.
And when that Revelation's looming, it's a tough fight to win.
So we'll see Steve play a Watergrave tap and just pass the turn back. So not even going to see an Extort here from Steve, as Ben is going to flash back a Think Twice, get himself a new card.
And that Watergrave being played tapped from Steve's side actually subtly matters a lot, because if Steve had Revelations in his hand, his own Revelations, his lands would almost certainly just be coming into play untapped.
Yeah.
With him playing that dual land tap, Ben can, from his perspective, no longer really worry about Revelations being in his hand.
Sure.
Which is why I think you saw Ben pause a little bit there on Steve's end step, processing the information of, all right, Revelations is not something I have to worry about right now. How do I want to use my mana?
Now, the interesting thing here for Ben, of course, we're working with perfect information here in the booth, as are you guys at home, is that you see Steve's mana base right now. He's got some cards in his hand. He's got these Lingering Souls tokens. He's got this Blind Obedience, and he's got all this blue mana in play. So is Ben going to play around a card like a Negate, like a Syncopate, like a Dispel for his Revelation, or is he just, is he just going to jam it and say, if you have a counterspell, you have a counterspell? He could certainly run into a situation where he does play a little bit more conservative, where if he knew what exactly Steve was doing, he would not even think twice about casting this Revelation.
Yeah.
But Steve, he is going to just pull the trigger on Revelation for 4, so no fear of a counterspell here.
So we found, was that like an Azorius Charm and some lands, kind of?
Another Revelation. Yeah. So he's starting to do what Esper does, which is chain Revelations together. So here come those Augur Bolas yet again. 2 more damage going across to Steve. You see Ben looking through his handful of cards. He's going to play an Isolated Chapel. He may or may not have to discard, but he is at 7 cards. Lingering Souls tokens will untap.
And another useless land from Steve here.
And I'm going to guess it doesn't tap for red mana either.
No. That is a Drowned Catacomb, it looks like.
So we're going to see another huge Revelation here from Lundquist. This one for 5, so 5 more life and 5 cards. You got to figure at some point he's probably going to find some sort of way to get rid of these tokens and just be safe.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if he cut a couple, but not all of his Supreme Verdicts. And he also has found an Oblivion Ring, which is really helpful too, because that Blind Obedience is basically the last real concerning card that Ben has to worry about here. I don't know if he's going to pull the trigger on it this turn, but it's a nice catch-all to have.
So let's see what Lundquist is going to do this turn.
He's just going to discard, yeah.
Lands. Okay. So not willing to pull the trigger on the Oblivion Ring just yet. See a couple of Azorius Charms. I think we see 3 Azorius Charms in his hand. Yeah, we do. Isolated Chapel, you see it. Yeah, you see him pulling Azorius Charm. You see him pulling Ultimate Price. He might actually just be perfectly comfortable just picking off these tokens.
Yep.
With Azorius Charms and Ultimate Prices and stuff like that. A little surprised because that's his plan to see him discard Ultimate Price. So it may not be his plan. We'll see how he wants to navigate as we see. What card are you? This is the first time I've been able to make out artwork for a card in a little while.
Yeah.
We'll figure out what that card that Steve just drew this turn in just a moment.
Yeah, I actually don't. I could not actually identify that artwork.
I've never been that stumped before. All right, so Ben looks like he's going to take the 3 points of damage. Still not willing. Another revelation in his hand. It looks like it may be a Devour Flush. No, that's not. That's definitely not what it is. He does just pass the turn back. So we will find out. We will wait and find out with bated breath as we see another huge revelation here for Lundquist. This one for 6. So Ben is going to draw 6 more cards, gain 6 more life. Again, happy to discard. Just basically sculpting right now.
Yeah. Once he gets enough far ahead on mana and cards, he can just start winning with Drown Yard and picking apart attackers as they sort of come up here.
Yep. You see a Syncopate in Ben's hand right now.
Like a Jace.
Yeah, this might be the old 5-mana Jace Memory Adept. You see Ben starting to organize his mana a little bit here. Moves the Drown Yard over. He's making sure that he has access to all the mana and spells that he wants to be able to cast. Here is your Jace Memory Adept, the card that we'll bring up on the screen for you guys. It took a little while, Patrick, for this to make waves, but it has started to do so in a big way.
Yeah, and you know that this Jace got dogged on a little bit when it got previewed, just because, unlike Balaran and Mind Sculptor, it's not completely over the line busted.
Yeah.
But this card is still very good. Big Trump and Control Mirrors. You know, if you're early on in the game, you're able to land this, you can draw some cards. And then transition to milling. Or if you're at the stage we're at right now, where Ben's already drawn a bunch of cards, he can just start going right after Steve's library, which is what you see right now.
So we are going to see an activation here. 10 cards will be turned over for Steve.
And this is actually very helpful for Ben in a number of respects. Number one, this Jason is almost certainly going to carry the game home. But secondly, now we actually will get full information on what's actually going on in Steve's deck. Based on what we've seen in the first couple of games here, Ben still, you know, if you're in his seat, you still can't draw a full conclusion on what Steve's deck is really up to. You know, there's still the question we had, Vulcan Wrath Aristocrat, is it there or not? Ben can't be 100% sure answering that question either way. Winning through milling here is going to give him the information that he needs to sideboard appropriately for Game 3.
And so now he does see what Steve's deck is up to. He sees an Angel Serenity, he sees an Obsidian, he sees the Sphinx Revelation, and another Prophetic Prism. So now he's got a much better idea of what Steve's deck is doing, which is kind of a mishmash 4-color control good card deck.
Yeah.
And so now he can sideboard appropriately, where maybe Ben did bring in Tragic Slips, and we just haven't seen them yet. But now if he did, he knows that he can certainly sideboard them out, as Blood Crypt is the draw for Steve this turn, giving Ben more information once he does probably cast Olivia Voldemort.
Yes.
You do see Lundquist. He does pull a Restoration Angel forward in his hand. You see a Glacial Fortress and some other things here. So, you know, he can still go with the damage plan. Maybe the Olivia will change some things, but he looks like he could also be just on the mill plan. So you're going to see Jace move down to 1 here.
I think you're going to see, as long as that attack doesn't kill the Jace, I think you're going to see Ben just try to pass this turn with as much mana up as possible, and then make a concerted effort to protect Jace the following turn.
Yeah.
With a defensive Restoration Angel, some Azorius Charms, what have you.
Fire all those bullets finally.
Yep.
Ah. So our Twitter followers have told us that mystery card in Steve's hand is a Garrick versus Liliana Mutilate.
Okay.
Of course it is. How
Sure.
do we not know that? We've tested that matchup a lot. We thank you, Time Twister 7.
Good looking out.
Yes.
I think Steve is contemplating casting a Mutilate before casting his Olivia.
Attention players in Legacy Winning Box number 1. Your event is ready up here.
Here's
at
our Blood
7
Crypt.
Once again, players in Legacy
Steve
Winning
going to move
Box
down to 6,
number
which
1,
is
your
certainly
event
not
is
irrelevant
launched.
at this point. The Esper deck typically does not win through damage, but with how this game has shaped up, it's realistic.
Yeah, I think we're probably going to see Steve get milled out this game would be my guess, as it's just not worth, from Ben's perspective, it's not worth using his resources to try to fight that kind of fight. But Steve is getting low.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a consideration he has to have now. Although I think we're going to see this blind obedience pull him up a little bit.
And we're going to see an Olivia Voldaren with a blind obedience trigger. The extort will be paid. You'll see a little drain, a little gain, and then we'll see what Lundquist is going to want to do on Steve's end step. And if Ben even wants to fight over this card, not sure if he has to dissipate in his hand or not, even if he cares about Olivia.
I think I saw a bunch of copies of Syncopate, but
Sure.
no Dissipate. I would be surprised. I think Ben kind of has the tools to work around this Olivia, and he just wants to hold that hard counter as long as possible.
So here's the thing, twice going to get flashback. And Ben is going to untap all those lands, along with those 2 copies of Augur Bolus. He's going to take a draw step here. Finds a Glacial Fortress. The Thalia Drown Yard was the draw off of the thing twice as well. So a little bit land heavy. But again, when you do draw 4, 5, and then 6 cards off 3 Sphinx Revelations, you've probably sculpted your hand in such a way that you're going to be okay.
So I assume we're going to see another. We're going to see Jace mill for 10 again.
Yeah, I think I believe Ben thumbed a Sphinx Revelation towards the front of his hand. Looks like he wants to maybe reset here as he does tap a couple of lands. It's going to be an Oblivion Ring. That's going to start the show. Olivia's going to bite the dust. Ben going to come across for 2 more. This might be an all-time record here for amount of damage Augur Bolus has dealt in a game. As we're going to see a mill for 10, it looks like. Yep, so here goes 10 more cards for Steve. And again, as you said earlier, just a lot more information here for Ben. As Ben is actually just going to... Ben says, I'll just take those, because I don't really know what's going on over there with your deck.
It looks like he's also brought in Merciless Eviction as well.
So you see Detention Sphere, Blind Obedience, a Mutilate, a Watery Grave, a Cremate, Eviction, Obsidian, Sign in Blood, and an Isolated Chapel. Looks like Lundquist is happy to just pass the turn back. So, as you said, we're probably going to see that protection here of Jace. You take a look at Ben's lands. He does have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He has 8 mana, enough to actually cast Restoration Angel, blink Augur Bolus, and cast 2 Azorius Charms.
Although Steve has just drawn Sphinx's Revelation here, which is a gigantic draw.
Sure.
Only saying the 2 at Jace and leaving 1 Lingering Soul back.
So Lundquist is going to Azorius Charm 1, he's going to Azorius Charm the other one, so just get those things out of here. Don't touch my Jace.
And if Steve had sent that 3rd Spirit, that probably would have induced a Restoration Angel from Ben, and then we would have a door open for a huge Revelation, which might actually pull Steve back into this game. As it stands, I don't think Ben's ever really going to tap his mana in such a way to leave his guard down. Steve might want to try to play around Syncopate here, but then his Revelation is just not going to be for very many cards.
And so you do see him thumbing a lot of mana here. It's going to be a Mutilate to clear things up. We'll see if Ben is okay with this or not. As Patrick, I am being informed that Augur Bolus was friends with Runechanter Spike back in the day, so actually not a record.
Solo.
Yeah,
solo.
but I think
it's a solo mission.
Yeah, this is a solo act here by Augur Bolus. This is most without a little help. So we're going to see Steve pass the turn back here. See if Ben's willing to pull the trigger on just a 3/4 flash.
Well, he also has a Drown Yard at the ready, too.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got a lot of things, a lot of paths to pursue here. He could try the rarely seen mill you out while applying lethal.
Ah, yes, yes. Have both ends covered. So we're going to see a mill for 10 here.
And this Jace is really just shutting the door on Steve even really getting to Revelate because he just doesn't have enough cards in his library.
What can he really Revelate into? And if he does cast a huge Revelation, he's basically attacking, he's dealing himself damage because his life total is now his library.
And you're seeing Ben display a lot of patience here. I think a lot of players who have just, fired off that Restoration Angel or tapped out to Drown Yard, whatever. Ben's taking this position of, I'm way ahead in the game. I don't need to risk anything. Even if there's cards I can't think of off the top of my head that I should be playing around, I'm just going to err on the side of caution.
As you are going to see that Sphinx of Revelation gets syncopated for 1. Ben did check how many cards Steve had in his library as he did cast that Revelation. Again, Steve, yes, he'd be drawing cards, but he'd also be dealing damage to his library, and that's the avenue that Ben is pursuing here. So Ben wanted to check just to see how many cards he has left, how many cards he'd be drawing if it does change the math. Decides to syncopate for 1. The Sphinx of Revelation does get exiled, and you do see that Steve's going to take a look at his graveyard here. See, do I have any lingering souls down there, perhaps, that I can try to turn this game around with? But it does look like Jace, Memory Adept, is going to mill another opponent out. And I think very shortly here, Patrick, we're moving on to a 3rd game.
Yep.
Between that Jace and those Nephalia Drown Yards, there's not going to be very much library left for Mr. Martincic.
And I'm really surprised that Steve has ported in. All right, so we're going to see a Prism and a Blind Obedience trigger.
We'll see if he's going to pay for the Blind trigger. I see 2 mana tap. We're just going to see Ben negate that.
And the reason to negate that there is he doesn't want Steve to draw into a creature that's relevant.
Yeah, who knows what he could draw into.
And that's just going to earn the concession.
Yeah. So Lundquist is going to win game number 2 as we do have about 20 minutes left on the clock here for game number 3. Time, a bit of a factor. We do have 2 very slow and plotting control decks here with Sphinx's Revelation.
Yeah, although Ben has gotten very good at playing this deck in an efficient manner. As you see Ben pulling some Supreme Verdicts towards the front of his deck now that he's seen the contents.
Yeah.
Which is a huge part of playing a deck like Esper proficiently in tournaments, is just being able to play in a timely fashion, because the matches that you draw are often going to be matches that you would have won had you had more time.
Yes.
And so it's very important to become proficient at playing the deck, not only making the right decisions, but also being able to come up with those decisions in a reasonable time frame. There's also times where it's correct to be willing to play a little bit less correctly in exchange for being able to play a lot more fast in certain spots. And that's another skill to have too, is knowing when to flip the switch of, I have to stop paying attention to the way that I'm tapping off my mana. I had to stop paying attention to pulling through my graveyard every single end step looking for Think Twices or thinking about Snapcasters, because it's just more important for me to just mill this guy out as fast as I possibly can. I'm a little bit concerned of this matchup kind of from Steve's side at this point. Not only do I think he's not favored just in terms of his 75 cards against Ben's 75 cards, but showing the amount of board control that he had in his deck. He not only had copies of Mutilate left in his deck, but he also brought in copies of Merciless Eviction. Makes me feel like he's just has too many cards that have little to no impact on Ben's game plan if Ben is just devoted to Revelations, Counterspells, and Jace.
Yeah, which is what the Esper deck is certainly designed to do in this matchup. He's not going to be able to outboard control Ben, and not only that, he doesn't need to. Yeah, he can't outboard control him because Ben can see more cards per game, and he doesn't need to do that. That's not the angle of attack that he needs to take. And are you willing to trade Merciless Eviction for a Jace Memory Adept? Maybe you are, but you certainly don't need to bring in a ton of those.
Yes.
You know, he does have 2 copies of him in his sideboard, but I don't even like. Ben's basically proven he knows what he wants to fight over, and I don't think it's going to be Merciless Eviction.
Yeah, I think that Steve's best game plan in this matchup actually involves Blind Obedience, Lingering Souls, sort of nickel and diming him, forcing Ben a little bit on the back foot, and then landing some of his own haymakers, whether it's his own Revelation, whether it's Obsidat, something like that.
Yeah.
Trying to out-control Ben in this matchup is not a fight I think Steve is equipped to handle.
Yeah. You see both players are going to keep their 7. Steve is going to lead off with a Blood Crypt. Ben goes with a Watery Grave, and we are underway here for game number 3. As we're going to see a Drowned Catacombs. He's going to follow that up with a Sign in Blood. So 2 cards going to go over to Steve.
I believe Steve's hand has at least 1 copy of Mutilate.
Yeah, I think and you see Merciless Eviction and Prophetic Prism are the draws here. And it does not look like he has a 3rd land in his hand, as Ben is going to draw a card. He is going to play, as you see, a Hallowed Fountain and a Nephalia Drown Yard in his hand, and it's going to pay 2. Hallowed Fountain's going to come down, and he is just going to pass the turn back. So Steve is going to draw a card. He draws another Merciless Eviction, and this is exactly what you talked about, Patrick, where he does have 2 copies of Mutilate and 2 copies of Merciless Eviction in his hand. Yes, he doesn't have any lands, sure, as he's going to play Prophetic Prism and try to draw into 1, but those are virtual mulligans at this point in the game. So really, how good yes, he does have cards, but how good of cards are they actually? Prophetic Prism is going to draw a card. He's going to draw a Godless Shrine and pass the turn. Ben briefly did consider countering that.
Yeah. And I think Steve there might want to give a little shovel of his cards. The way that he played Prism and then played that Shrine, I think he's pretty clearly signaling that he has no more lands in his hand.
But he does peel off another one in the form of Isolated Chapel. And so here is your Chapel. Let's see if we're going to see a Lingering Souls here. As Ben opted not to play that Godless Shrine on tap to maybe bluff a Dissipate, maybe cast a Syncopate for 1. So here are 2 Spirit tokens. And you do see a Syncopate in Lundquist's hand. This is going to draw a Restoration Angel here for the turn. Nefalio Draenard is going to be his land. But we'll see, he's just going to leave the shields up. Steve with a Cremate on the end step.
I assume we're firing this off on our Sign in Blood.
Yeah. I don't think Lingering Souls would be the most prime target there. Perfect analysis for you, sir. Glad to have you back in the booth.
Hey, this is what I do.
That's right.
I make this look easy.
As Angel of Serenity is the draw for Steve's turn. Again, no land here, so no 5th land. Here come your 2 Spirit tokens to start the turn. As Lundquist can't pull the trigger on a Restoration Angel, but again, he does just want to leave those shields up. Let's see what Steve's going to follow up with his second main phase.
Okay, so he's going to lead with Lingering Souls here.
And what were you going to say?
Well, I like testing Ben out here. Maybe he'll counter Lingering Souls, and then you can land your Blind Obedience. Yeah. Blind Obedience seems very important to land, even though Steve's hand's not very well set up right now. To me, it seems integral to his overall game plan.
As Blind Obedience is going to resolve as well, so Ben is just going to take the opportunity to play a 3/4 Flying Flash in Restoration Angel. Quickly untaps. Don't see a land in his hand right now, so we're going to see Azorius Charm get cycled main phase. Then he's going to draw a fresh card. It's a Think Twice, so we don't see a land here. And one thing you also see is that he tapped in such a way that he doesn't have blue mana to actually catch Think Twice land.
Yes.
So maybe a bit of a planning error there?
Yeah, that could be disastrous here if Steve is able to land Obsidat.
You see that Ben has a Negate and a Syncopate, just a blue cards in his hand that he doesn't need to cast. And we're going to see a Lingering Souls here. We're actually going to see an Orzhov Charm, taking care of the Angel with a Blind Obedience trigger. So if he had Negate, then he would have certainly cast it.
Yep.
So maybe a small hiccup there from Lundquist. He could also be enticing. We don't quite know. Now here come your 4 Spirit tokens, as you guys do see Orzhov Charm on the screen. The Charm with many modes, as Ben does draw a Dissipate for the turn.
Yeah, I had to imagine that was just a mistap.
So now we'll see Think Twice. Ben draws a Restoration Angel. Again, not a land, having mana troubles again in this match. You saw game 1 where he did take that mulligan of 6 and only did have 2 lands. He was never able to find a blue source to be able to play his spells, as he's going to discard a Sphinx's Revelation and pass the turn back. So again, this is how we saw Steve win game 1 on his mulligan of 5 Lingering Souls, in addition to a little bit of pressure there from Blind Obedience, providing a little bit of inevitability. And here comes those 4 Spirits yet again. Did not have the timely Orzhov Charm in game 1, but he didn't need it.
Yep. Yeah, like I said, I feel like this is the kind of game that Steve is equipped to win. Even though he's on a contextual mulligan to 3 at this point, as he has 2 Merciless Evictions and 2 Mutilates in his hand.
But what he does have is Olivian Valderin. No Extort trigger because he does not have a 5th land. So we're going to see a Syncopate for 1. Ben is going to counter that, slow down the clock a little bit, quickly untaps. He draws a card. It is an Oblivion Ring.
He has no Supreme Verdict.
Nope. Now, O-Ring here is certainly not bad, as it's almost worth taking out that of Blind Obedience, but if you take that out, you put yourself down to 3 from those Lingering Souls tokens, you're in a bit of trouble. So, does he need to cantrip here?
Oh, he has I think he's got
Curse in his hand, yeah.
He's got Curse of Deathhold in his hand here.
So he's just really trying to hit that land drop to be able to cast Curse of Deathhold. Turns the game around in a huge way.
He has a Dimir Charm in his hand.
He just passed the turn back. Okay.
It's a big draw for Steve here.
So he finds a swamp. And there is an Obsidat in his hand.
Right.
So we're going to see an attack here for 4. Will Lundquist pull the trigger on something here? Demir Charm.
All right, so we're gonna swat away one of the tokens and fall to 4. And I assume we're just gonna go for Obsidat here.
Yeah, it's pretty hard not to, right? It forces Lundquist to have an Essence Scatter or a Syncopate. That's pretty much it. He's already burned 1 Syncopate. Here's Obsidat. You see Ben look through his hand. And now he knows he's in trouble, and he does concede the game. So Steve Martincic is going to win this match 2-1 over Ben Lundquist playing Esper Control. That's how you thought the game would have to go for him to be able to win it.
Yep.
And that's exactly how it went. Yes, he did have those Merciless Evictions. Yes, he did have those Mutilates. But the Lingering Souls in combination with a little bit of Blind Obedience Extorts and an Obsidat is going to be enough to take it down, as Ben did just have some mana issues.
And you had to wonder, I mean, that one turn where Ben, it looked like, at least to us, that he mistapped his mana and wasn't able to fire out that thing twice. Who knows how differently that game goes if he's able to find, you know, he ends up with mana issues the whole way. He's tight on mana at certain points, and it could have been a huge deal. That one mistap